Let's take a look at the case structure when we're using the string and enumerated data types, and those give us a little more flexibility in how we specify case selections on the front panel. So I'll begin by placing a string control. I'll just rename that as input value, and let's scoot that outside the case structure. So since the default case had simply two subdiagrams, then they turn into true and false, but now as string constants instead of Boolean type. So now I can type in whatever strings I like. Perhaps apples for this subdiagram, pears for the next one, and I would rather have the default be something else, so I'll delete that part. I would like my default subdiagram to be the apples case. All right, let's do a little bit of computation on the inside here. So we'll do either multiplication or a division. And here I'm kind of illustrating that the usual technique of automatically creating the control doesn't work here, probably because the data type isn't understood yet at the input there. So let me go ahead and actually create the controls on the front panel first. Incidentally, what I'm doing here to do things quickly is hitting Control, then Shift, and then click down on the object and drag to make the quick copy. Now I want to scoot these all over at the same time. Notice that the frame of the case automatically extended to keep those two inside, so I guess I'll do those individually and then scoot them over this way. So in the apples subdiagram, we'll evaluate the product of A and B. And I'll call my output Y. For the pairs case, I'll do the ratio of A and C. Notice that I do not have to have every input go someplace, so the input can just be unattached. However, every output somehow needs to be attached to something. So I'll go ahead and add a third subdiagram. And if I like now, if I type default, we see that we had the first two are specified by the string constants, and the third one is any other string constant. And I'll just generate minus 999 if that condition should occur. Let's get some values to the inputs. And let me bring this down where you can see it a little bit better. So apples, as you might recall, is supposed to be the product of A and B. Pears is supposed to be the ratio. Let me first try what happens if you had mistyped that. So that's our default case showing up. So if you are trying to set this up as a user interface, you find that the string constant technique doesn't handle the possibility of mistyped values very well. So let me try redoing this idea with the enumerated data type as the input, and we find that under a little farther down. Let's try that again. There we go. There's my enumerated data type control. You see it's blue, so that means it's generating an integer as the result. What I'm trying to do here is do a right click and then select edit items. And the idea here is you type values that you actually want to see inside the control. So for example, if I've selected apples, then the value that's produced is 0. If I select tomatoes, which, yes, that does in fact have an E on it. If I select tomatoes, then the value being generated is 2. Alright, so let's replace that case structure again. Now, since I've just placed the case structure, it only has 2 subdiagrams, and it's latching onto apples as being the default. You might recall that apples was 0. Pears was the next one, and so those were the only 2 conditions showing up. Now here's a nice thing. If you add a case for every value, now it uses, or it is now 3 subdiagrams all ready to go for you. You can also move the selector terminal around a little bit if it's not in a convenient spot for you. And just to save time, I've gone ahead and completed the subdiagrams for each of the 3 possibilities. So tomatoes is doing the negation operation. Okay, so I've picked apples. Let's see, I can pick pears. That's my ratio showing up. Tomato. Well, that was supposed to be tomatoes, right? So if we stretch that out a little bit, we can see the full string showing up. And there's our -2. Now I'd encourage you to spend a little bit more time looking at the options that are available when you do your right click. You have lots of possibilities in terms of editing items, removing, adding items, temporarily disabling items, and so on. Lots of stuff. Let me show you one more before we leave this one. If you look under menu ring, what I'm doing now is replacing one control with the other type. And this is kind of a nice technique where you can make a nice user-friendly menu for your choices.